The siren sliced through the frozen air like a blade. Snow swirled across the highway outside Soliletsk, blurring the flashing blue lights into streaks of electric color. A black prison transport van skidded slightly as it slowed, its tires crunching over the fresh ice. Inside, the air was thick with a tension that made even the most hardened officers grip their weapons just a little tighter. A man was dead. He'd been found less than an hour earlier, slumped against the inner wall of a secure holding corridor, just meters from one of the most heavily guarded cell blocks on the entire planet. There were no signs of a riot. No alarms had been triggered, and no witnesses were willing to speak. The location of the body made everything worse. This wasn't just any prison. This was Black Dolphin Prison. Officially, it's known as Penal Colony Number 6, and the facility sits like a scar on the flat, frozen steppe of southern Russia. From the outside, it looks almost ordinary. Gray concrete walls, watchtowers spaced with mathematical precision, and steel gates layered like the skin of an impenetrable fortress. But everyone who worked there, and everyone who was sent there, knew the truth. Black Dolphin is where the Russian penal system sends the men it never intends to release. Serial killers, terrorists, cannibals, those serving life sentences without parole. Once you enter its gates, you don't leave. Not alive, anyway. Which made the body found inside its walls an impossible problem. Colonel Sergei Morozov stepped out of the van, his boots sinking into the snow. He was in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, with a face permanently etched into the stern expression that comes from decades in internal investigations. He had seen his share of prison violence. He'd investigated cover-ups, corruption, and murders disguised as accidents. But this call had made his stomach tighten in a way it hadn't for years. A death inside Black Dolphin meant one of two things. Either the most secure system in the country had failed spectacularly, or someone had deliberately bent it to their will. Morozov was escorted through the outer gates, each one slamming shut behind him with a metallic finality that echoed in his chest. Inside the compound, harsh floodlights washed everything in a sterile white glow. Guards stood in pairs, rifles held close, their eyes tracking every single movement. The silence was completely unnatural. Usually, even the most secure prisons hum with a distant noise, shouting, metal clanging, the constant low murmur of human misery. But here, there was nothing. Just the wind, the crunch of boots on concrete, and the faint, menacing buzz of electricity in the air. Where was he found? Morozov asked, his voice low. The warden, Viktor Karpov, walked beside him. Karpov was tall and gaunt, his gray hair cut close to his skull. He had run Black Dolphin for 7 years and wore his fearsome reputation like a suit of armor. Corridor D, Karpov replied, his tone clipped. Between the isolation cells. Morozov stopped walking. That corridor is under constant surveillance. Yes. No blind spots. Correct. No inmate movement scheduled. Correct. Morozov stared at him, letting the silence hang. Then explain to me, warden, how a man ends up dead there. Karpov's jaw tightened. That's why you're here, Colonel. They moved deeper into the prison, passing through checkpoints that required biometric scans, metal detectors, and keys that only existed in single copies. Every clanging door reinforced the same chilling message. Nothing here happened by accident. Corridor D was narrow and low-ceilinged, the walls painted a sickly, institutional green. Cameras dotted the corners, their small red indicator lights glowing steadily like malevolent eyes. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and cold stone. The body lay slumped against the wall, covered partially by a gray sheet. Morozov crouched and pulled it back. The man was middle-aged, his head shaved, his prison uniform neatly pressed. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing. There was no blood, no visible trauma. Cause of death? Morozov asked, his gaze scanning the body. Preliminary assessment suggests cardiac arrest, Karpov said. But, Morozov prompted, looking up. But he was 38. No known heart condition. His medical cleared him just last week. Morozov stood up slowly, his eyes drifting from the body to the cameras on the ceiling. Pull the footage. Karpov hesitated for just a moment. We already did, he said quietly. That's where things get complicated. They walked to the control room, a sealed space lined with monitors showing every corner of the prison. A technician sat stiffly at his desk, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Play it, Karpov ordered. The footage rolled. The screen showed Corridor D, empty. No movement. Not even a flicker of shadow. The timestamp advanced steadily. Then, without any warning, the man simply appeared in the frame, already collapsing to the ground. Morozov leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowed. Rewind. The technician did. One moment the corridor was empty. The next, a body was falling. There was no glitch, no flicker in the feed. It was as if he'd materialized out of thin air. Just ever heard of a place so secure? It's called the Vault? That's Blackwater Penitentiary, the most advanced, inescapable prison ever built. It's home to the world's most dangerous minds, a fortress where every move is watched, every whisper recorded. But last Tuesday, the impossible happened. Inmate number 734, a former cryptographer named Elias Thorne, was found dead in his solitary confinement cell. The official report? Suicide. A simple, clean, closed case. But I knew Thorne. He wasn't the type to give up. My name is Detective Kaido Tanaka, and I don't believe in simple cases, especially not in a place like Blackwater. The warden, a man with a face carved from granite, handed me the file. Thorne had apparently hanged himself using his bedsheet. No note, no struggle, just a quiet end. But the cell was a Faraday cage, completely isolated. The cameras showed nothing unusual. The guards on duty had perfect alibis. It was too perfect. As I walked through the sterile, echoing corridors of the prison, the silence felt heavy, like it was hiding something. Thorne's cell was exactly as he left it. The bed was neatly made, a single book on the nightstand, Moby Dick. Everything was in its place, except for one tiny detail. A small, almost invisible scratch on the polished concrete floor, right beneath the bed. It was a single, perfect circle with a line through it. A symbol I'd seen before, but not in any case file. I started digging into Thorne's life. Before his conviction for leaking state secrets, he was part of a clandestine government project, codenamed Oracle. The project was officially disbanded, its records sealed. But Thorne wasn't just a cryptographer. He was the architect of its communication system. He designed a code that was supposedly unbreakable. As I cross-referenced the Oracle project members, a pattern emerged. 3 of them had died in the last 5 years, all from apparent accidents or suicides. And now Thorne. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a cleanup operation. The symbol in his cell wasn't a random scratch. It was a message, a warning, the first piece of a puzzle he left behind for someone to find. Back at my office, I found an old encrypted drive Thorne had sent me years ago, a so-called insurance policy. I'd never been able to crack it, but now I had a new key. That symbol from his cell. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a variation of an ancient alchemical sign for truth. I used it as a passphrase, and the drive unlocked. What I found was terrifying. The Oracle project wasn't just about communication. It was a predictive system, an algorithm that could analyze global data to forecast political and economic events with frightening accuracy. It wasn't disbanded. It was taken private by a powerful shadow organization that was now using it to manipulate world events for their own gain. Thorne hadn't leaked state secrets. He had tried to expose them. They silenced him and locked him away in a place where he could never speak out. But Thorne was smarter than that. He knew they would come for him eventually. So he created one last puzzle, a trail of digital breadcrumbs hidden within the prison's own high-security network. His death wasn't a suicide. It was the final move in a game of chess he'd been playing for years. The scratches on the floor, the choice of book, even the timing of his death, it was all a message, a roadmap. Thorne had turned his own prison into a weapon and his death into the trigger. He had built a dead man's switch, set to release everything he knew onto the open internet. And now, the people who killed him were racing to stop it, while I was racing to make sure they failed. The case wasn't just about finding a killer anymore. It was about exposing a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power. Thorne's last message wasn't just for me. It was for everyone. The truth is coming, and it can't be stopped. Thanks for watching. If you're intrigued by stories that peel back the layers of deception, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. The guard said it was a simple heart attack, a routine death in the bleakest corner of a Russian prison. But when Colonel Irina Lazina arrived, she knew something was wrong. The body was too cold, the story too neat. This was no ordinary inmate, and it was certainly no ordinary death. Her investigation began in the sterile, white-tiled infirmary. The official report, signed by the prison doctor, was flawless. Too flawless. A sudden cardiac arrest. Case closed. But Lazina noticed a tremor in the doctor's hand, a flicker of fear in his eyes. He was hiding something. She pressed him, using the full weight of her authority, and the story started to crumble. The doctor confessed he'd never even seen the body. He was ordered to sign a pre-written report by the prison warden himself. This was no longer just a suspicious death, it was a cover-up. Lazina's instincts screamed that the answer wasn't in the official files. It was somewhere in the prison's concrete bones. She started her search in the deceased inmate's cell. It was sparse, empty, except for a loose floor tile she found under the bed. Prying it open, she discovered not a hidden stash, but a crude, hand-drawn map. It didn't show an escape route. It showed a way down. Following the map's cryptic symbols, she navigated the prison's labyrinthine corridors, ending up in a desolate storage basement. The air was thick with the smell of damp and decay. Behind a stack of rotting crates, she found it, a section of wall that didn't match the rest. It was newer, cleaner, a hidden door. It wasn't locked. As she pushed it open, a wave of stale, conditioned air hit her. This wasn't part of the original prison. This was something else entirely. She stepped into a pristine, high-tech corridor, a stark contrast to the grime she'd just left. The corridor led to a single, reinforced door with a digital keypad. This was a secret level, a prison within a prison. Using a service code she'd memorized years ago, she bypassed the lock. The door hissed open, revealing a room that was more of a laboratory than a cell. And inside, sitting calmly at a desk, was the man who was supposed to be dead. He wasn't just an inmate. He was a legendary hacker, a ghost in the machine the government had supposedly caught years ago. But they hadn't just imprisoned him, they had been using him. He was the linchpin of a massive state-sponsored cyber warfare program, operating from this hidden bunker. His death was a charade, a way to transfer him to a new, even more secure location without anyone knowing he was still alive. The warden wasn't just a prison official, he was a handler for state intelligence. Lazina stood at a crossroads. Exposing the truth would mean taking on the most powerful and shadowy elements of her own government. It would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power and put a massive target on her back. The warden and his superiors had staged a death to protect their greatest asset. But in doing so, they had made one critical mistake. They had brought Colonel Lazina into their world of secrets. And she never, ever let a case go unsolved. Her investigation was just beginning. Thanks for watching. If you're fascinated by mysteries and conspiracies, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We dive deep into stories like this every week. See you in the next one. Which means, Morozov said, he was silenced. That night, the first warning arrived. Morozov returned to his temporary quarters to find the door ajar. Inside, nothing appeared disturbed, except the blueprint he had hidden beneath his mattress. It was gone. In its place lay a single chess piece. A black rook. Morozov didn't sleep. By morning, events escalated rapidly. Lieutenant Petrov failed to report for duty. His quarters were found empty, his uniform neatly folded on the bed. No signs of struggle, no surveillance footage showing him leaving. Officially, Petrov had been reassigned. Unofficially, Morozov knew better. Someone was cleaning house. Morozov confronted Karpov in the warden's office. "Where is Petrov?" Morozov demanded. Karpov didn't look up from his desk. "I told you to be careful. You let them take him," Morozov said. Karpov finally met his gaze. "You don't understand the scale of this." "Then help me," Morozov said. Karpov's voice dropped. "If I help you, I become disposable." Morozov leaned closer. "So do I." That evening, another death shook the prison. A guard was found in a stairwell, his neck broken, his radio smashed. Surveillance footage showed him escorting an unseen individual, his posture tense, his movements rigid. Then the feed cut out. For exactly 30 seconds. When it resumed, the stairwell was empty. Morozov stood over the body, the pattern becoming clear. These weren't random acts. Someone was moving through Black Dolphin with authority that overrode cameras, protocols, and lives. Someone who operated above the prison. Morozov returned to level Black alone. Volkov was waiting. "I wondered how long it would take," Volkov said. "You set me up," Morozov said. Volkov shook his head. "I warned you." "What do you know?" Morozov asked. Volkov's expression turned serious. Level Black isn't just for containment. It's for testing. Morozov felt the floor drop away beneath him. Testing what? He asked. Control, Volkov replied. Psychological endurance. Loyalty. Obedience. They bring in men who know too much. They break them. Or they erase them. Morozov clenched his fists. Who is they? Volkov leaned forward. If I say the name, I die. If you hear it, you die. Morozov stared at him. Why tell me any of this? Volkov smiled faintly. Because the system is cracking. And when it does, I want to be on the right side of history. An alarm blared suddenly. Low, unfamiliar. Volkov's eyes widened. That's not a drill. The lights flickered. Somewhere above, doors slammed shut. Morozov's radio crackled to life with overlapping voices, panic bleeding through discipline. Unauthorized access, level black, multiple breaches. The door to Volkov's cell slid open without command. From the corridor came footsteps. Heavy, measured, not guards. Morozov drew his weapon as shadows moved toward them. Volkov stood slowly, his calm gone. They're here, he said. Morozov turned, heart pounding, as figures emerged from the darkness. Men in unmarked uniforms, faces hidden, moving with mechanical precision. One of them raised a weapon. And Morozov realized, too late, that level black was never meant to be investigated. It was meant to erase anyone who tried. The lights went out, swallowed level black. For a split second, Colonel Sergei Morozov couldn't tell if he had gone blind or if the lights had truly failed. Then the emergency strobes kicked in, deep red, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat struggling to survive. The men in unmarked uniforms didn't hesitate. They moved forward with discipline that screamed military training, boots silent against concrete, weapons raised with lethal certainty. No shouting, no warnings. This wasn't a prison response. It was an extraction. Morozov fired first. The gunshot thundered through the corridor, sparks exploding as the bullet struck the wall inches from the lead figure's head. The men scattered instantly, fluid and controlled, taking cover behind reinforced doors and pillars. Volkov grabbed Morozov's arm. This way. Where? Morozov snapped. Down, Volkov replied. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. They ran. The corridor sloped downward, deeper than Morozov thought possible, the air growing colder with every step. Behind them, boots followed, but not fast, not frantic, patient. They burst through a blast door and into a chamber Morozov had never seen on any blueprint. The room was massive, circular, its walls lined with glass panels. Behind the glass were cells, but not like the ones above. These weren't designed for punishment. They were designed for observation. Inside each cell sat a man. Some paced endlessly. Some sat perfectly still, staring straight ahead. Others whispered to themselves, fingers twitching, eyes hollow. Monitors above each cell displayed vital signs, psychological assessments, and classification codes Morozov didn't recognize. This isn't incarceration, Morozov whispered. No, Volkov said grimly. It's experimentation. Morozov felt his chest tighten. On prisoners. Volkov shook his head. On problems. Morozov turned slowly. What does that mean? Before Volkov could answer, a voice echoed through the chamber, amplified, calm, authoritative. Colonel Morozov, please lower your weapon. Morozov spun toward the sound. A figure stepped into the red light, tall, composed, wearing a dark civilian coat instead of a uniform. His hair was neatly combed, his expression almost polite. Who are you? Morozov demanded. The man smiled faintly. My name doesn't matter. That's usually a lie, Morozov said. The man clasped his hands behind his back. What matters is that this facility exists to protect the state. Morozov gestured around him. By torturing men in secret? By understanding them, the man corrected. By learning how far loyalty can bend before it breaks. How silence is enforced. How fear reshapes the human mind. Volkov laughed bitterly. You break them, then discard them. Some are discarded, the man agreed calmly. Others become assets. Morozov's stomach dropped. Like Volkov. The man inclined his head. Exactly. Morozov turned on Volkov. You said you wanted to be on the right side of history. Volkov met his gaze, eyes steady. I never said I was innocent. The man raised a hand. Enough. Colonel, you have two choices. Walk away, and this investigation ends. You will be reassigned. Promoted, even. Or continue, and join them. He gestured to the cells. Morozov's grip tightened on his weapon. And Petrov, the guard? The man who died. The man's expression didn't change. Acceptable losses. Something hardened inside Morozov. You don't get to decide who's acceptable, he said. The man sighed, almost regretful. That's where you're wrong. The strobes flickered. In that instant, Volkov moved. He lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into Morozov, knocking him aside as gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered glass panels, alarms screaming as cells depressurized. Prisoners screamed, some collapsing, others pounding against their enclosures. Chaos exploded. Morozov hit the floor hard, ears ringing. When he scrambled up, Volkov was already moving, heading straight toward the man in the coat. You promised me immunity, Volkov shouted. You were given survival, the man replied coldly. Volkov tackled him. They crashed to the ground, grappling. Morozov saw Volkov's hand dart toward the man's inner pocket, then freeze. A blade flashed. The man drove it into Volkov's side, once, clean and precise. Volkov gasped, blood blooming dark against his uniform. He collapsed, eyes wide, shock overtaking calculation. Morozov fired again. This time, the bullet found its mark. The man staggered back, clutching his shoulder, surprise flickering across his composed face for the first time. He retreated, disappearing into the smoke as the unmarked operatives regrouped. Morozov dropped beside Volkov. Why? Morozov demanded. Volkov coughed, blood staining his lips. Because someone has to tell the story. He pressed something into Morozov's hand. A data drive, slick with blood. Everything is on there, Volkov whispered. Names, locations, orders. Morozov shook his head. We can still get you out. Volkov smiled weakly. No one leaves level black. His eyes dimmed. Morozov stood slowly, rage and grief twisting together inside him. Around him, alarms wailed as containment protocols activated. Doors slammed shut. Gas hissed through vents. He ran. Using the chaos, Morozov navigated service tunnels, emergency shafts, routes designed for disasters no one was meant to survive. Twice, he heard footsteps close behind. Once, a bullet grazed his shoulder, burning like fire. Finally, he reached an old drainage access that led beyond the perimeter wall, buried beneath years of snow and neglect. He crawled through it, lungs burning, and emerged into the frozen night as sirens howled behind him. Black Dolphin sealed itself. Officially, the incident was labeled a containment breach caused by inmate violence. Volkov was listed as deceased. Colonel Morozov was declared missing, presumed dead. But the data drive survived. 3 weeks later, journalists across Europe received anonymous packages. Encrypted files, video footage, documents stamped with the same classification marks Morozov had seen on the blueprint. Level Black was no longer a secret. Governments denied everything. Investigations were announced, then quietly dissolved. No one was prosecuted. No prison was closed. Black Dolphin still stands. Still silent. Still watching. And somewhere in the system, a replacement for Level Black was already being designed. Cleaner, deeper, harder to find. They thought the truth would bury them. Instead, it escaped. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because some prisons don't just lock people up. They lock the truth away with them.